Hello everybody, and a warm welcome back to the Nürburgring Nordscleife for a delayed session for top qualifying. This was due to begin a little earlier on in the day. In fact, it did. We had cars around the racetrack and then an absolutely almighty accident for Laurens Vanthoor down at Arenberg, which means that the number 16 Scherer Sport PHX Porsche is not going to be able to run in top qualifying. The session was immediately red flagged in order for the medics to head to that vicinity. They got there very, very quickly, but the car was an absolute wreck. Thankfully, Laurens Vanthoor able to be taken away, and early indication is that he is fine. But clearly now the car cannot run, and we're going to be instead looking at 16 cars rather than the allocated 17 for this top qualifying session. It's been adjusted, therefore, and the pit lane will effectively open at 4 o'clock. Cars still sent off at 10-second intervals from the pit lane rather than the main straight. And the other big difference, gentlemen, Joe Bradley and Ben Constanduris, I'm Johnny Palmer, is that everyone's only going to get one lap rather than the prescribed 2.
Yeah, it's going to make it even more exciting than it perhaps normally is. I think importantly as well, the good news is that Laurens Vanthoor was taken to the medical centre after that massive accident. He's been examined. He showed that he's in good health. So that is the best news coming out of what looked like a very, very scary incident.
The question will be whether we get a chance to see that car participate in the race. Such was the damage, the car going through the Armco barrier, and the images really didn't look very good of the car itself. Laurens was able to get out of the car under his own steam. The team is based here at the Nürburgring, so it is quite possible that the car could go back to the shop rather than the garage, and they could work on it overnight. We've got about 24 hours before the race begins. In fact, we've got exactly 24 hours until the race begins tomorrow. Do they have another spare chassis in the workshop? Because I presume by looking at the car that the chassis will be a write-off, but there are lots more questions to be answered there.
Yeah, so there's going to be some shuffling of the order. 27, which is one of the Red Bull, or the Red Bull apt Sportsline Lamborghini, has now been potentially pinged for not obeying red flags and actually overtaking on the red flags as well. That was the Stefan Aust Aston Martin that Mirko Bortolotti passed. Then he reacted to the red flags and slowed just before Spaltenschwanz, but that's currently being investigated, and it might be that his best time, a bit like Adam Christodoulou, is potentially going to be taken away from the Lamborghini driver. The question mark about Adam Christodoulou is that he was caught speeding in the pit lane, 7 kph above the required 60. But we were asking ourselves before coming on air, because the session was red flagged, is that now wiped from his record and he can go again in this session, or does it linger on into the new 4 o'clock part of the day? I've no idea.
I just want to make a comment on that Bertolotti incident with regards to the red flag. As he came upon the first red flag that he was able to see, he was too busy focusing on the rear end of another car, and he would not have been looking away from that rear end of the car to gauge getting by the car. Immediately he passes the car that he was focusing on, he seemed to immediately notice the red flag and backed out massively. And I think it would be very harsh to penalise him in those circumstances, as there was a lot happening at that time when that red flag came out. For him, I mean.
Yes.
This is still called top qualifying. This is, and I guess the question remains, is this a resumption of top qualifying from before, or is this a new session with new regulations? If it's a new session, then the fastest time regulation that we saw Adam Christodoulou, the speed in the pit lane, which meant that he would lose his fastest time of the session, that would be of the last session, and he now participates in this as a new session, and it therefore be null and void. If this is a continuation of the last session, then his fast lap time, which will be his only lap time, will be null and void. He will then be at the back of not the 17 cars that we have here, because we have one car in this session that is already being put to the back of the group. So not just the back of this session, but the back of the SP9 field categorically. And then you've also got the 16 car that won't set a lap time. So Potentially 15th is where he's going to be. And then you've got the question mark over the Lamborghini as well. I did notice that he is in this queue, so he is going to go and participate and set a lap time that may or may not be then deleted.
I think you're better off doing that and then arguing things afterwards.
Yeah.
At least there's a lap in the books somewhere, rather than going, oh, well, why do we even need to bother? Set a time, then ask questions later. What Mirko Bortolotti will be saying is, well, that was in the previous session as well.
Yeah, true.
Caught me doing the red flag incident.
And normal red flag situations, normal red flag regulations is you take it from the lap previous to the red flag. Well, there was no lap previous to the red flag. The red flag came out on everybody's opening lap. So I would like to think, and the way I'm looking at this is it's a clean sheet of paper. Everybody's going out into this fresh session of top qualifying, and we're starting completely. Everybody is, whatever's gone on in the past is null and void, and it's all about qualifying and forming the grid for tomorrow's start.
It's the same order then of the cars that set off earlier in the day from the main straight. So the 34 Aston Martin, which is on the Michelin tyres. Danish driver Nicky T being selected as the qualifying pilot. And the Trinity Solutions GmbH, or the Valkenhorst Motorsport Aston Martin, is set on its way. 10 seconds later, Nico Menzel in the Falken Motorsports Porsche, number 33. Now, that had its own dramas in the first version of this as well. Didn't make it beyond the Grand Prix track, in fact, Ben.
No, a binding right front brake didn't allow that wheel to rotate, which then caused a puncture. And they were able to come and fix it in the pit. So whatever the pressure, whatever the reason for the binding brake, they replaced the tyre. They then fixed the binding brake, and that car was about half a lap behind everybody else. So it didn't take very long. Gave him beautiful track position because he would never have caught up with anybody. But it did mean that he, in theory, lost one of his 2 fast laps. Interesting that he's in this session because he was on his second lap when he was out on track. Therefore, in theory, he doesn't have any laps left. But that would take into consideration if this was a complete session, including what we saw previously. I think this is a brand new session, and therefore the penalties are disallowed.
It looks completely like a brand new session. It's not a continuation, so we are starting clean, and everybody's being shuffled out there onto the track. We've had 12 cars that have left the pit lane, another 5 to go. Next car out is the number 14 of Mara Engel, the Mercedes, the Get Speed Mercedes. They're looking very splendid. This is the yellow and black coloured one. The teammate to this car is that very, very pretty purple, well, different shades of purple, isn't it? The Christodoulou car.
It's been a long time since Mercedes last took victory. 2016 with Maro Engel, Adam Christodoulou, Manuel Metzinger and Bernd Schneider was part of that team.
Wow.
So what's that? Is that 8-9 years ago? That was the last time Mercedes took victory here.
Yeah, 2015, I think Adam said, didn't he? 2016.
However, Mercedes are often on pole because they put Maro Engel behind the wheel, and I think he's had 4 Glickenhaus trophies already. So now going for a 5th. 2 years ago, Raffaele Marciello, when he was still a Mercedes driver, having now moved on to another major German brand, he managed to do an 8:09.0, which is just about the fastest time within the last decade.
I'm not a betting man, but if I was, my money would be on a Mercedes. We have seen nothing of the Mercedes in qualifying sessions 1 and 2. And that's because they didn't really need to show us anything, because they had already qualified through to top qualifying. And so I think we are going to see the true speed of the Mercedes-AMG GT3 in this new session.
If you weren't with us earlier on, this is what happened to Laurens Vanthoor then, catching the curb at Schwedenkreuz, spinning the car on that short straight down to Arenberg, and then the car just disassembles itself. It's like a crumple zone going into a wall. An obvious concern for Laurens Vanthoor for a few moments there, although the medics were with him so quickly. Marshals as well in attendance. It's demolished the Armco barrier, actually split the layers apart, we think, from that high up camera angle. Still a very peculiar incident. That is a car that's had a lot of work done to it over the last couple of days after a drive shaft problem on Thursday, which did untold damage to its connecting point to the engine. So they basically sat out all of qualifying 1, then did a run-in test during qualifying 2, and it was that late time from Laurens himself, late last night, at about 25 past 11, which actually got it into those crucial 5 top spots and into top qualifying, but it is out because it's far too badly damaged.
So the first car out, Nicky team in the Volkswagen Motorsport Aston Martin Vantage, just going up that rise to the iconic part of the Nürburgring Nordscleife. The carousel dips into the drainage ditch, as is the common practice these days. Never designed that way back in the 1930s. It was Caracciola who has the carousel named after now. He was the first to try it by putting the car into the concrete banked part of that corner and picked up a lot of speed, and since then it's become common practice to do that all the way through the Formula 1 years here at the Nürburgring, and now we see this as the practice of how to get round here very, very quickly.
Already seeing a couple of drivers and cars swapping positions on circuit. We saw it in the precursor, whereby third and fourth on the road, which has now become second and third on the road. The Ferrari of Thomas Neubauer getting ahead of the Pro-Am car, the number 30 Valkenhorst Aston Martin, which presumably has sort of been a discussion that had been established pre-session. On this warm-up lap, let me go past, as in the Ferrari to go past, because I'm going to catch you on the lap. You can follow me, you can learn a bit from me, and maybe I'll drag you along a bit. And obviously the number 30 team deciding that was a good idea. I also think that further down we're seeing a change of order between Engel and Hartling, although they're running very close on the track together at the moment. In fact, the 11 has caught up with Maro Engel, so it's actually Engel going slowly rather than Hartling letting him past.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, that was a long sector 4 for the Munich man, Maro Engel, but that's only a very short sector, 10 seconds, 11 seconds. He's done about 14 seconds. All 16 cars that we had expected to take part in this session are out there, though, and circulating. So those that are potentially in hot water: Adam Christodoulou in the number 17 Mercedes. The 11 car, well, that's going to be put to the back of Group 1 anyway, regardless of its time within the session. And the other one with a bit of doubt is Mirko Bortolotti's number 27 Red Bull team at Lamborghini, that he shares with Danny Juncadella and Jordan Pepper after that alleged red flag infringement. More to follow on those cars as well.
Audi number 1 through Brunchen. From Brunchen, he'll head out through the Flansgarten. We've already got Nicky team in the 34 Aston already on the Dottinger Horn coming back towards us. It'll not be long before he's at Tiergarten, and we will see, we'll get an idea of... this is not a timed lap, of course. We're still on the out lap, so this is an insignificant, from our perspective, it's very significant in how these drivers will have got their tyres up to where they want them to be, not overusing them. And we can see team now just easing off through Tiergarten now, just not pushing the energy through the tyres, and now crosses the line to start what will be the first lap of top qualifying.
The only lap.
The only lap, indeed. The pressure's on, eh?
We saw this last night as well in qualifying 2, where SP9 cars that hadn't got through into top qualifying through automation had the track to themselves, and they did only get one lap before they were interrupted by the grid of 120 odd other cars that joined them. But it was very interesting to see how much faster they were able to do on that single lap at the start of the session without any traffic. And only really Laurens Vanthoor right at the end of qualifying 2 was able to improve with a normal session being run. Qualifying times should be below 8 minutes and 10 seconds. We've seen as quick as 8 minutes and 8 seconds, but usually we're in the 9s, and it very much depends on the balance of performance year on year as to what the cars have been given in terms of power.
Now, I'm expecting when the Lamborghinis begin their only flying lap that they'll show good speed on the Grand Prix track. They've done so over the last day and a half or so. So 27 and 28, both the apt cars got into the top qualifying, but courtesy of the sessions this weekend rather than having been a pre-qualified car. Nico Menzel in Porsche number 33 of Falken Motorsport is already faster by 0.6 of a second over Nicky Thiem through that first bit of the Grand Prix track, though, and Thomas Neubauer not hanging around either in the only Ferrari in the whole of the entry for Realize Condo Racing, the number 45 car. Gaps come down a little bit between the two Audis. That's surely the number 1 car getting ahead of Alexei Veremenko to give Markus Winkelhock an open road in front.
So Nicky Thiem, of course, showing purple sectors as he's the first driver into those sectors. However, beaten by a couple of tenths by Menzel in the Porsche, who's the second car in the line. So just taking a little bit of time out of the Aston Martin now is Menzel in that Falken Motorsports Porsche. Matching the time to the absolute thousandth in Sector 2 is the Ferrari of Neubauer. That's the 45, 42.779 for the Falken Porsche, 42.779 for the Ferrari of Realize Condo.
Yeah, but it's a great time from Bortolotti through that first part of the Grand Prix circuit. We're still waiting for Mirko to complete the whole of the Grand Prix Strecke and then turn left at Sabine Schmidt's curve. Over the line will go the two-tone purple, bit of pink on there as well, the startling livery for Adam Christodoulou's Get Speed Mercedes for the 2025 edition of this wonderful race. It's the 53rd version of the ADAC Ravenol Nürburgring 24 hours, beginning tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock. This is top qualifying to determine the top 16 places on the grid. There's now the 44 Falken Motorsport Porsche with the red door mirrors, driven by Maurice Schuring, heads down towards the early corners of the Grand Prix lap.
Seems as though a 40.0 is really where you want to be in that first sector, which is half of the Grand Prix loop, and anything above that is not great, which means Nicky Thiem's Sector 1 wasn't particularly great. We still haven't got a Sector 1 from Estra, Engel, Hartling or Owega, the only Ford Mustang in the field. But 40.0 is where you want to be. Bortolotti just a little bit faster than that, 39.9. He is still the fastest man through Sector 1. Sector 2 seems to be going to the moment to Dan Arrow. And what a man to be selected in that number 48 machine to run in top qualifying. It's not a huge amount of top-level experience, Dan Arrow, but making his name for himself over the last couple of years in one-make Lamborghinis, for instance, and he's been entrusted with the Pro-Am machine to do qualifying that was in the barriers, if you remember, heavily under the barriers in qualifying last night. Rebuilt for this top qualifying and going fast.
Yeah, Mustafa Mehmet Kaya, the Turk, had the incident. I'd half expected Gabriele Piana to do the qualifying, but young Dan has stepped up, the talented Dutchman, doing racing all around the world early in his career. So many people have paid close attention to his talent. Nico Menzel, meanwhile, heading down towards Breitscheid, and now that tricky right-hander uphill en route towards Bergwerk now. The second car in the sequence. Car ahead of him also on, well, in difference to this car, on Michelin tyres. The Falken cars, no prizes for guessing, they are on Falken rubber, both the 33 and the 44. And it's Menzel finding the time over the Dane, about 10 seconds ahead of him on the road.
Menzel just being beaten in Sector 5, 46.560 was the Porsche, the Falken Porsche of Menzel. Through Sector 5, he's just been beaten again by the Realize Condo Ferrari of Neubauer, 146.2. That's a considerable difference there, picking up time in Sector 5. The leader's just into Sector 6 now, and the Menzel car just coming through in a 35.7. Again, we wait a little bit longer for the rest of the field to come through and see just how that matches.
Unfortunately, consistently, Nicky Thiem, the first car on the road, being beaten in all 6 of the sectors that he has completed, so it's not going to be a particularly good time for the 34 Valkenhorst Aston Martin. Aston Martin yet to take a victory overall in the Nürburgring 24 hours, the 53rd edition this year. And guess who's going fast at the tail end of this queue? Kevin Estre. He's already shown his class last weekend at the Le Mans 24 hours, despite not being able to show his class in qualifying there. but he is 13th on the road. He's got the purple Sector 2, the purple Sector 3, and now the very short purple Sector 4. We wait to see half the field through the long minute and a half of Sector 5.
Yeah, that's a big one, isn't it? That's a lap on a conventional track, really. Just barely under 2 minutes for that Sector 5. Sector 5 is the section between Schwedenkreuz through Arenberg, down the Vauxhall, up to Kallenhard, all the way to Exmüller, before we then slip into Sector 6, which is slightly shorter, only just over 30 seconds for Sector 6. So that is a key part of the track and a very technical part of the track to keep the speed up, especially coming out of the Vauxhall, down into the compression, and then up the hill towards Mexicafeld. It's you need a bit of courage about you, and a lack of imagination is my view.
Well, we're going to get 4 purple zones, 4 purple sectors in a row for Kevin Estre. Waiting now for him to go through that second longest Sector 5. Meanwhile, Nicky Team's heading for Galgenkopf and actually getting a change of surface flag, the slippery surface flag, indicating maybe a bit of spillage of something offline. Yeah, there's some quick dry that's gone down there that he's now kicking up the dust. So Team onto the Dottinger Hoor, the first of these 16 cars to make it that far. But already Nico Menzel has proven to be a tad faster. And the answer to the question about Kevin Estre, he's again quicker than all the other cars that are ahead of him on the road through Sector 5.
Purple in 2, purple in 3, purple in 5. Not sure about 4 because I've taken it off my screen.
Yeah, it's short,
purple
but
in
yes.
4, yeah. He's absolutely on it. We know how good this driver is. His drive at Le Mans, that opening stint in the number 6 Porsche, and then to get that car starting at the back of the hypercar field, and that was all about that opening stint from this driver, Kevin Estre. That's entertaining us here. The number 911's the car we're talking about, the Manthey Porsche. We know how good they are.
Aston Martin coming to the line to set the benchmark for the rest to try and beat. We know that it will be an 8:19.396 in Nicky Team's first and only effort. It's a pretty slow lap for the Aston Martin.
So Nico Menzel, we reckon, will be a tad faster, but how quick is this first of, what, 4 Porsches that are in the session going to be? Menzel will cross the line with an 8:14.2. That is 5 seconds faster than Nicky Team's Valkenhorst Motorsport Aston Martin Vantage. So Porsche have the upper hand, although Thomas Neubauer in his blue and white Ferrari has been really doing well through various sectors and will go even faster by 3, nearly 4/10 of a second. Ferrari 296 run by Rinaldi, quickest so far.
Next up, the number 30 machine. That is another of the Valkenhorst Motorsport Aston Martins, but this is the Pro-Am machine that's already given track position away to Neubauer, and a discussion being had, so it's not expected to challenge the top 3, and indeed slowest of the 4 runners so far on an 8:38. Next will be Mirko Bortolotti, starring in top qualifying earlier on, but only slots into 3rd position.
Next up, the number 1 Scherer Sport Audi. This is the car that changed its tyre supplier, remember, this week. Swapped from the Yokohamas onto the Michelins, and that will come through in 4th. And 8:15.294. They're coming across the line thick and fast now.
So many different manufacturers that are potentially or have been in the mix so far this week. 0.3 of a second the difference, Ferrari to Porsche. Bortolotti missed out on 2nd position by just 84 thousandths of a second. We're obviously still waiting for Kevin Estre's time in the Manthey EMA Grello Porsche. He's still in the long Sector 7. In fact, speaking of the devil, at Schwalbenschwanz, the second concreted section, and makes no delay coming out of there on towards Galgenkopf. The rebuilt 48 Porsche of Dan Arrow goes 6th fastest for Black Falcon Team EAE. So that, at the moment, is the outside of the 3rd row.
And that splits the 2 Valkenhorst Motorsport Aston Martins, because Christian Cognes went up into 6th position. They've all been beaten by Luca Engschler in the 2nd of the Lamborghini Huracans from Abt Sportsline. He goes into 5th. Christodoulou only 8th position in his Mercedes.
Yeah, it's my money down the drain. This is the car that everybody is looking for, though. The number 911 just coming off the Dottinger Hoor now through towards Tiergarten. The 911, Kevin Estre, just flicking the car left and right. takes the right-hander, and then will blast out very early on the power there, skirts the barrier on his right.
This could be
Looking at the line, Johnny.
a first pole position for Porsche in 7 years, and it was a Grello car that took it in 2018. That was his teammate at the time, Laurens Vanthoor, but now Kevin Estre to the top with an 8:12.7, a full second clear of anybody else. However, Mauro Engel hasn't yet had a say.
The only car left that can really challenge Kevin Estre at the head of the field. Mercedes with just 2 victories to their name at the Nürburgring 24 hours. He comes to the line. Engel can only slot into third, and that is top qualifying over and done with. Yes, there are still 2 cars to come, but they are too far down as Pro-Ams. Mercedes into third, Ferrari second, but Kevin Estre does it again.
So maybe an unlikely result to get one of the Italian cars on that front row. This is Yusuf Ovega coming through in the HRT Ford Performance Mustang to make it into the top 17 as it was. Remember, only 16 running in this session because of the crash for Laurens Vanthoor earlier in the day. Yusuf Ovega, who is gold graded, will go to 11th fastest in that Pro-Am offering from the Haupt Racing team, an 8:18.6. And now a problem at the just after Flansgard.
Yeah, it's just at the Flansgard, Johnny.
For J-Mo Hartling in the SR Motorsport by Schnitzel on Mercedes. Well, this was the car was going to be put to the back of Group 1 anyway, so not a huge amount lost, but it wasn't the final car on the road, so Yusuf Ovega will have had to deal with the yellow flags throughout his lap.
Just him was behind Hartling, but you're right, that would have slowed Ovega down just a little bit, slots into 11th position, and that is top qualifying done. Not a particularly fast qualifying lap, but that's possibly because it's the only lap that they had available to them. Had they been able to do 2, they would have been able to push that boundary even tighter. But Kevin Estre with a pole position time over a second clear of everybody else.
Yeah, well, that's 1.2 seconds, isn't it, if you're counting tenths. 8 minutes 12.741. Not the quickest lap we've seen this week so far. And in second place, the Realized Condor Racing Ferrari, 8 minutes 13.9. That's a chunk of time to put that Porsche of Estre on the pole position. 8 minutes 14.233 was the first of the Mercedes. That's Mauro Engel in the number 14. And unfortunately, the number 11 Mercedes, we mentioned that car looked like it had just ground to a halt. It hadn't hit anything. That car just looked like it had stopped out there on Flansgarden. So it will still qualify in 16th spot.
Kevin Estre, though, receiving, I'm sure, huge applause, cheers down at the Goodyear Carer at the bottom of the hill. Driver's door open as he waves to the crowd. Part of the reason why we didn't get anywhere close to the 8:10.5 set by Chris Haase last night is that all these cars were on full tanks, or should have been, at the start of the session. So as they were released from the pit lane, that's your chance to burn a bit of fuel off on the installation lap, and then you push as hard as possible. Thomas Neubauer is absolutely ecstatic at his work there, and I'm not sure many would have had him down to be able to out-muscle all of the Mercedes and several of the Audis as well. Aston Martin was a bit of a disappointment for Nicky T, but are we still in a phase of the weekend where 1 or 2 are not wanting to reveal precisely all the pace they have? I mean, does qualifying really matter for a 24-hour race? Is the old adage.
Does it? That's Kevin Estre.
Well, yes.
The boot is on the other foot for Estre because qualifying didn't matter in hypercar last week at Le Mans, and he came through the field from the back of the hypercar field to lead the race. He eventually ended up, after 24 hours, on the second step of the podium. He's going to be on the pole position. Can he make it one step further up that podium this weekend?
Le Mans, you know, after about 4 kilometres, you've got a big, long straight where you can overtake people pretty easily. Here, that doesn't really exist until about 23 kilometres in. You want to have nice, clear track ahead of you and stay out of all the trouble because it's a competitive 27, 26 car SP9 field. There's going to be a lot of squabbling going on in those early laps.
Standard.
Especially of those cars, actually, that missed out in this top qualifying, that perhaps in pure pace could have been in this qualifying, or indeed, let's say the number 11 that's going to be out of position. It's not a full reflection of the pace of our cars because of the slightly quirky nature of the format this year, and then this disturbing the way that it's happened today with top qualifying being only one lap.
Yes, it was certainly was off-piste and not to the prescribed script. I mean, go and ask the guys at Rover Racing, for instance. They're the only ones with a BMW GT3 in this race. Were not able to get their car into the top 5 after qualifying 1 and 2 were finished. In fact, 9th, although they did have some pre-qualifiers ahead of them. In reality, that would have put them 8th, I reckon, when you take into account those cars that were already into top qualifying. But Augusto Farfus, Jesse Krohn, Raffaele Marciello, Kelvin van der Linde, they'll be hoping to try and get through those early laps unscathed, and their final starting position is still undecided in actual fact, because if you're going to start the race from 18th, might be 17th, might be 16th now, depending on how many cars are actually eligible to start in the front pack. But those places in behind the top qualifiers, it's all dependent on whether you can go faster in qualifying 3, which is now a shortened session. There's 65 minutes rather than the 90 minutes, but Q3 will have a say on the back of the SP9 grid.
Under normal circumstances, we're putting a lot of emphasis on those drivers only had one lap. Under normal circumstances, at a conventional racetrack, you have only got one lap where your tyres are optimised. The Nürburgring is a little bit different, perhaps not so much in top qualifying, because you're supposed to have a clear lap, and that's what you're given. And maybe, you know, the pressure of that one lap qualifier that we've just seen is kind of common practice.
So top qualifying we had to wait for a good portion of the day, eventually getting there, and it did not disappoint. Kevin Estre, even though he was waved off as the 13th car in the sequence, you had to keep your eye down at the bottom of the screens. The purple times were on their way, and Kevin Estre doing what he does best in across the line, actually flattening the rest of the field by over a second, 1.168, the differential between his car and the realised Condo Racing Ferrari 296. Can the Ferrari be quick across a stint length and not just single lap speed? But we knew the Lamborghinis were fast in certain areas of the track. The Ferrari has just been sneaking beneath the radar. Might it have a say for this weekend?
I wonder whether Lamborghini did what Joe and I were talking about in the break and went back and analysed what they had learnt through the first half of that first top qualifying session and tried to maximise this one by maybe making a couple of setup tweaks. And it's gone the wrong direction because they were stronger in the first one than this.
Everyone will have gone back and tried to tweak something. And it would have been a very rare decision from a race engineer and a race driver not to fiddle. Even when you've got, you know, that's the best time we've done all week. Yeah, but we're still going to change something. But why? Because that's what they do. And sometimes you get it right, sometimes you do, you get a little bit more performance, and sometimes, and I think the Lamborghini may be an example of that, where you maybe go just a little bit over the edge with performance and you lose something somewhere, lose a bit of balance or somewhere. But certainly the tyres would have been at their fittest going into another lap with a clear run. Your tyres aren't going to be necessarily as good as where they were on the first lap, because you are wearing them out ever so slightly, but you are wearing them out.
Of those cars that are potentially under investigation for infringements, either, well, both of them actually earlier in the day. So the 27 Red Bull team apt Lamborghini of Mirko Bortolotti, he did a time good enough for 5th position, 8:14.3. But will that now be removed because of his alleged breach of the red flag regulation, doing some overtaking when the reds came out after Laurens Vanthoor had his incident at Arenberg? And the other car, Adam Christodoulou's number 17 Mercedes, qualifying in 10th place provisionally with an 8:17.3. Again, that car could be put to the back of the lead group. But a few moments ago, Kevin Estre crossing the line with an 8:12.741. And in 2018, his teammate on that day, Laurens Vanthoor, who we're obviously thinking about at the moment, as although he was been cleared physically by the medics, we wait to see whether he is cleared okay for the race itself. Plus, are they able to find a spare car in readiness for the 53rd edition of this race?
It has been announced during that session that they have withdrawn from the race in number 16.
Okay. Thank you for the update there. That hadn't got through to me. So we are going to be down to just one Scherer Sport PHX car, and that is the Audi, which has switched to those different tyres. But they are the defending winners from a peculiar race in 2024, where we barely had any hours of running. In the background, by the way, actually you can hear the flat six of Kevin Estra's car setting off on its quick lap. So a chance to see precisely how he did it around the 25.3-kilometre racetrack.
It fascinates me how these superstar drivers actually drive the Nordscleife. It's on a conventional track, which is where the car is now on the Grand Prix part. It's maximising your braking point, your turning point, the speed through the corner, using all the track on the left, using all the track on the right, through the left-right flick of the chicane, the faster version this time before we're about to turn left, and through Sabine Schmidt corner, and then out onto the Nordscleife. And these drivers, the like of Kevin Estra, will optimise every single metre of this Nordschleife section. They will maximise their entry, they'll maximise their speed through the corner, and it's just fascinating to watch. They know this track, every single inch is, they've been around this so many times. They know what curbs to use, as we saw there. They know what curbs, more importantly, not to use. And we saw that earlier, didn't we? With that slight mistake, whether it was cause or effect. We wait to find that out, but tremendous to watch, such talent.
And there have been changes to certain parts of the racetrack, as we were discussing earlier on in the day. Certain bits of it have been resurfaced, repaved, and that has brought the road level either slightly lower compared to the curb, or at Brunchen slightly higher. So the Brunchen curb on the exit is not as steep these days. Schwedenkreuz, though, which is, we think, where Vanthoor got into his slide, just taking too much curb, or did something break on the car. Still trying to work out precisely what happened. But this is the moment where Vanthoor had his spin, blistering speed through Schwedenkreuz, and to just get the car to vaguely the other side of the road in time for Arenberg takes some talent.
And by riding on board there with Kevin Estra, you now realise just how fast Vanthoor was going there, because that was almost flat out, and it was almost top speed for Estra. There was the slightest breath off the accelerator, because actually, by the looks of things, as you get to the apex, there's a slight rise and a slight bump just to unsettle the car, and you saw Kevin's car moving around. Laurens had lost the car before that point, but I wonder whether that bump then compounded his correction. We continue on the lap with Kevin Estra. Nothing particularly super dramatic right now. It's clean, but he's definitely not overdriving it.
No, it's all about smoothness. It's all about positioning the car. It's all about positioning the car, not necessarily in a conventional way for, say, a right-hander, but you position the car for what's coming after that, and it's that knowledge of the track, of what's coming after, around this one. Is it that section where I need to keep a little bit before I turn in, a little bit to the left through the sweeps there, the right-hand flat-out sweeps, before we then get on the brakes, and just watching it inch perfect, staying off the high curbs, using the exit curbs, just letting the car breathe, keeping the engine revs up, getting the right gear, of course, all part of the job for a driver like Kevin Estra.
I noticed on the Grand Prix loop at the very start of the lap, the fronts were not quite with him. He had a little bit of understeer through some of the Grand Prix sections of the track, but presumably that's exactly what you want, because the car comes to you through the lap. And as we're now midway through the Nordschleife, front end is much more as he wants it. When he turns, it sticks, it brings the car round, then he can get on the accelerator to bring the rear of the car around, and it works really well through this section, which is flat out apex after apex after left after left after right. You just have to keep your foot pinned and believe.
Let's just listen to the engine through Kesselchen and Klostertal, because this is flat. Then another breathe, slight dab of the brake.
A little bit of a lift again. A little bit of a lift through Klostertal, and that's the left-hander before you head towards the right-hander that leads towards the carousel. And they're heavy on the brakes through the right-hander. Now we got get on the power nice and early. Let's just see how he takes and where he positions the car to enter the ball of the carousel. Takes it nice and early. You feel like you're abusing the car, rattling across the concrete slabs, throws the car out. The inertia fires you out of the carousel ball. And then this, probably the hardest part of this track to learn as a beginner, into the section through S-back, Brunchen. We're into Whipperman at the moment. And this is where the track knowledge will bring you the lap time. Positioning the car, maximising your turning speed, which of course leads on to maximising that all-important exit speed.
He's climbed through the curves there. Could have used more if he wanted to.
So heading down towards Brunchen now, massive campsite, huge, great, really music festival going on, and then a race as well. And so many people actually forget the sort of main reason for being here at the Nürburgring for the 24-hour. That's the curve that's slightly lower than this year at Brunchen.
Yeah, a little twitch there as well.
Ice curver, where it's very slippery at times, not on a day like this. Flansgarden. I didn't hear the car actually leave the ground. It might have done by a matter of millimetres. And now heading for the Stefan Beloff S in the distance and the second concrete strip at Schwalbenschwanz.
This is a really, really tricky part. The track goes uphill through a very fast right-hander. It's where you choose to lift, where you choose to get back on the throttle, and then the left-hander leading up to the Kleine Carousel. We then into the Kleine Carousel, a smaller version in the carousel. Now we're getting towards the all-important right-hand sweeps onto the Dottinger Hohe. And this is important because this speed through here, through this right-hand section, getting onto the power nice and early, you carry that speed all the way down this really long straight, maximising out at, say, 270 kilometres an hour.
They come out of that last corner at 220.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of... If you come out at 10 rather than 20, then you carry that disadvantage all the way along these couple of kilometres. And because of the aerodynamics of a GT3 car, you're hitting terminal velocity pretty quick, and as you can hear, he's going no faster.
Yep.
So a waiting game now. Through Antonius Bucher, the kink underneath the bridge. How late do you brake into Tiergarten? Still flat, and now the breath of the throttle, the braking down to 110 kph for that kick out of Hohenrhein, and the link road back to the Grand Prix circuit. So this is the reward after a huge lap from Kevin Estre to see the lighting gantry in the distance, and it was an 8:12.741. Certainly not one of the quickest times we've seen in top qualifying over the years, but remember, full tanks and a warm day as well, so maybe trickier to do to get the tyre heating process, whereas the session in the past has been held at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the evening.
My first Nürburgring 24 hours had Kevin Estre on the pole in the McLaren. Can you remember that?
Just about,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. I think that was about 2015.
2014.
What was
there
that,
was a McLaren
14?
on pole, I think, in 14.
Well, that was my first one. There's the grid.
Here we go then. Kevin Estre then with a pole position for Grello, and the whole Porsche brand have had to wait 7 years for it. And alongside a Ferrari of Thomas Neubauer, the 45 realised Kondo racing car. Then Maro Engels Mercedes for Get Speed, the 33 Falcon Motorsport Nico Menzel driven Porsche. Mirko Bortolotti, will that 27 Lamborghini be allowed to keep its 5th place on the provisional grid ahead of Markus Winkelhock Scherer Sport PHX Audi. The second of the Lambos for Luca Engstler, number 28, ahead of Valkenhorst Motorsports Christian Krognes, 35, in a Pro-Am Aston. Then Dan Arrow's 48 Black Falcon team EAE Porsche ahead of Adam Christodoulou in another Get Speed Mercedes. The rest of the runners either pros or AM cars, with the exception of Mickey Team down in 12th position. That picture though for Valkenhorst Motorsport Aston Martin could get better if 2 of the cars ahead of it on the provisional grid are put to the rear.
Estre around 2 seconds slower than Christopher Hasser managed at the start of Q2 yesterday, which was in similar sort of conditions in terms of time of day and in terms of the track clearance. But I think top qualifying, the pressure of that only 1 lap opportunity meant that there was something left in the tank, and I think we saw that at certain parts of the circuit. Estre measured with how far to push the limits in that lap. There is definitely more pace out there, and we might see it now we move into qualifying 3. with those cars that didn't get into top qualifying, trying to prove a point.
Yeah, that session is due to start within the next 5 minutes, in fact. So that session for all of the other cars, plus the SP9s that did not get into top qualifying, all the other cars will be entering.
Yeah, and it's just started now. I can just hear the green flag.
There we go. So bang on time at 22.5, and it's a 65-minute session. Kevin Estre, though, the hero of the day, not for the first time, in the Grello Manthey 911 numbered car that he shares with Thomas Breining, Ayanchin Gubin, and don't forget Patrick Pilet's in that car as well. Cannot wait for the race starts tomorrow at 4 p.m. after a warm-up session at midday. The next time we will see the raciest SP9 cars. RS1, part of the Radio Show Limited network of channels. So the top qualifying is pretty much decided, with one or two question marks regarding cars that have potentially earned themselves or had